Welcome to the Big Fat Real Estate Checks podcast with Marco Kozlowski, where we help investors like you get the knowledge and skills you need to replace your JOB with passive cash flow for life.
Hey everyone, welcome to Big Fat Real Estate Checks, where we are going to be discussing how you can increase your wealth using skills, not money. And I am Marco Kozlowski. I'm joined with Gabriella Raish and Francesco Galluccio. And we are going to be discussing today a little bit something that springboards on what we just did on the last episode, which is A, market shifts, B, which side of the coin you want to be on. Do you want to be in the buying side right now, or if you have cash and you just don't want to necessarily develop the skills to find assets at tremendous discounts, what do you do with that cash in order to make it grow, which goes into this episode before the last episode, which is retirement. What if you do have some capital, how can you increase your nest egg in order to really have more money than you'll ever need to retire? And if you want to, blow it and just live high on the hog, you still have plenty of cash left over because you have really grown your money significantly during, in the past or in the future. In the past, if you're retired; in the future, if it's now. Hopefully that makes sense. So we'll have this candid discussion, and let's, again, if you've not listened to the first 10 episodes, that explains how we tap into asset-based lending, which is kind of the topic we're going to be discussing today, is how to be an asset-based lender, at least the brushstrokes of it. This is definitely not a class, and full disclosure, you want to talk to an attorney. We're not giving you any financial advice or any legal advice for sure. Definitely consult with the powers that be that you trust to do any of the things that we're discussing. The last thing I want you to do is do something thinking that you know exactly what to do, and then you get hurt. This is not the point of this conversation. It's more for education purposes, and we definitely want to help you learn how to grow your money at significant interest rates, no matter what happens. Whether the person that you're doing business with actually does what they say they're going to do, or if they don't say what they're going to do, what they say they're going to do, you actually end up making more money, which is one of the reasons we also started our own private equity fund, for that very reason, because we win big no matter what happens. So, that was a long introduction. Gabe,
yes,
would you like to start?
Sure.
Since Frank started last time.
So if you've listened to the last episode where we discussed the market shift and how lending is pretty much it's at an all-time high for banks. The money's cheap. A lot of people are borrowing money at 1-2%, and that's great. But that's if you're borrowing from an institution. So I just want to, make the parallel between financial institution and asset-based lenders. So the financial institutions are doing a lot of credit-based lending, and they look at things like not only your credit score, but what assets you have, your debt ratios. So how much are your debt payments compared to your income? So there's a lot of different scenarios that they have to look at, and risk-based issues that they have to take into account before lending you money. So an asset-based lender is going to use the property as its only criteria. If the property makes sense and the cash flow is good and it makes sense to lend you money, they'll lend you money regardless of your credit score or your debt ratios. And this is why, if you know individuals that have large portfolios, a lot of them use asset-based lenders, even though the interest rate is much higher than a regular lender, because there's no ratios, they're able to tack on more and more debt, even though they're backed by assets, but they're adding debt to their balance sheet. Whereas a bank won't allow you to do that. So once you're at 4 or 5 mortgages of a significant size, they may say, that's enough for you right now because you're too much of a risk for the bank. So asset-based lending is very interesting because if you're on that side of the fence where you're the one who's lending the money against an asset, you can take advantage of these high interest rates. And it's not uncommon for us when we're using asset-based lending to pay 9, 10, 11, sometimes higher percent annually on money that we're borrowing. So and a lot of the times these asset-based lenders, depending on the property and how it's bought, they may limit you to 70, 80%, maybe some of them will go to 90% of the value of your property. So I think this is an interesting topic given this, the time period we're in right now, where there's a lot of people looking for properties, a lot of people paying top dollar for property. And, in the last episode, we explained that maybe this wasn't necessarily the time to buy and hold if you're looking into multifamily, just because of this fierce competition and people overpaying. So if you're into the buy and hold and you like that asset class, then we preached patience last time. And patience doesn't mean that your money just sleeps. You can use it, but why not lend, for example, as an additional strategy, where while you're waiting for this shift to happen and these, this asset class to take a hit based on the foreclosures ending, or at least the moratorium on foreclosures ending and the foreclosures starting, and all the house of cards falling apart in the real estate industry, you can lend in the meantime and make a pretty decent return. And then you can pick and choose the assets that you want to lend against, because those are going to be assets that you're comfortable ending up with should there be a default.
Sorry, Frank, just one thing. So what you're saying is, first of all, if you don't have any money, it's going to be hard for you to lend. So if you're listening to this and you're broke, then this is, you can listen to this for fun.
You can use other people's money to lend.
I'm
not saying you should be. I'm not saying you should, but you could.
Hey, Gabriel, you wrote a book about this, so I don't even know.
And I could do it.
It's
compliant. You can do it compliance-wise. Is it recommended? That's going to be based on your ability to take the risk. You got to be certain, but it's doable.
Tabarnak. This is not something I want to get into right now.
No, but I'm just saying it's possible, but this isn't what you should be doing.
All right, so you're going to the loan shark, you're borrowing the money.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
X%, and then you're relending the money.
Actually, that's not true.
Whatever.
I'm doing it now inadvertently. I'm using. I think we discussed this on the Jam call not too long ago. One of our Jam calls that we have every Wednesday, where we have students join myself and Gabe, and people ask questions, and we learn from one another, trying to help solve those problems they have. But I do it as well. I'm a lender. By default, I just lend to myself. Well, not to myself. I lend to my
company,
U.S. entities. Mm-hmm. So I take the bank's money, not my money, guys. I take the bank's money because they're saying, like in the previous episode, they're giving me 1.15. They're giving me 2% on a line of credit. So they give me 2% on a line of credit. I take that, and I'm very generous to myself, to my U.S. entity, and I charge myself 11%. So I charge my entity. So Frank and my wife, Linda, will take the money from X bank, who I have a line of credit for, at 2%, right? And I'm going to lend it to ABC US Corp in the States at 11. So I make the spread on that. And it's usually a time-sensitive thing. It's a bridge. It's a 1, 2, 3 year loan on that.
I want to just halt sort of that direction, because not everyone has the ability to do that. So
I get that, but I just wanted to emphasize what Gabe was saying. It doesn't mean that you have, even if you don't have the money, that's just one strategy. If you do have lazy money, you can still do that. Yes.
So if you do have a line of credit, for example, at 1 or 2%, and you were to lend at 10 or 11, then you're making the spread on that. Just make sure you know exactly what you're doing when you're making that investment to lend, that you know exactly that you're going to get paid back. I know that Frank trusts Frank and Linda.
Yes.
Right? So you trust yourself to be able to pay it back. And the reason, if someone's questioning why the hell would you do that, the answer is you get a tax deduction on the 11%, and you have use of the money to be able to do something, and there's a paper trail. So it's, from a tax perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, because for those that are listening, you're rolling your heads up in the eye going, okay, I can't do that shit next. Don't want to do that. So don't change the channel just yet. If you have access to money that's cheap and you want to lend out the money, or you have money sitting in your account, or your self-directed Roth IRA, or self-directed RRSP, or self-directed 401k, or super fund if you're in Australia, or whatever other fund that is in, that you can self-direct legally to really lower taxes, lending is a very, very powerful strategy and tool. And you can protect yourself from default, meaning that there's paperwork that you can put into place that actually you don't even need foreclosure. After default, you automatically get the property without going through foreclosure. And there are ways of doing that to really protect yourself from the legal court system that will drag on forever and cost tens of thousands of dollars in attorneys, and we've solved that many, many years ago. So if you have money that you want to place and want to avoid the legal battles, I would rather have the asset. So if you're making $50,000-$60,000 a year on the loan, and the property's making $100,000 on the cash flow, if they default, you now get the cash flow of $100,000 versus the 50-60 you were making on the actual loan, and you get the equity difference. Now, what you were saying before, Gabe, with 75, 80, 90%, there's no way on God's green earth as a lender, specifically as an asset-based lender, I would never lend that high.
I agree. I agree with you.
A max of like 65, 70%. Absolute max on the loan total, on the value of the asset.
But some do, and that was the message.
Yes, which is stupid.
Agreed.
Because if you're lending at 85% and there's a market shift, you're basically exposed at 100. You're 100% going to lose money.
Especially now in this market, right? Because people are paying a lot more than value. So even if you're lending 85, 90%, when the market shifts, those values are going to come down. So even if you take back a property, maybe you're taking back a property that's going to be worth 10% less than the mortgage that you lent on it.
It's a recipe to lose money for sure. So you want to be as conservative as possible, and generally 70% of the value of the actual cash flowing asset, not the value of the real estate itself, is going to be a lot safer, because the cash flow, if you buy the property with $100,000 of existing cash flow, for example, and let's just add a zero, and it's worth at least $1 million, and you've lent $700,000, you're safe, because that $100,000 in cash flow is going to be consistent no matter what the market is doing, whether it's up, down, sideways. That $100,000 in cash flow is always going to be there. If you're buying it on the value of the real estate, which is subjective to whatever someone's willing to pay, right? My property is worth, more than it was last month because, the market's hotter, but as the market cools off, the value of the real estate will go down. So I prefer cash flow versus value of real estate. And that is a much safer investment if you, again, understand that, and you're not exposed to more than 70% of the actual value of the asset, not the overvalue, but a conservative value. You're going to be just fine, and you can get a really good rate of return, whether whether they're defaulting or not defaulting. If they're you're charging, for example, 8%, it's a lot more than you would normally be making if it was just sitting in your self-directed IRA decaying, or getting 1/8%, or even actually -% if it's sitting in your bank account. So, and if you're borrowing the money at 2 and charging 8 or 9 or even 10, depending on the size of the asset, the bigger the asset, the cheaper the money is going to be. But it's still more than you were making.
And that cash flow is going to be the lowest that you're going to be making on this project, right?
That's the worst.
That's exactly
correct.
Frank, did you have something to say?
No,
We can
other than lend it to myself, no, it is a good strategy. Listen, if you got lazy money, you're not gonna go park it in a bank. I think in my last episode I talked about my dad putting some money aside for his grandkids, and he came back to me. He goes, what's this? He goes, they only gave me $18, and he thought it was. He thought he was getting 1.5%. It was actually 0.0015, whatever. That's like a fraction of a percent. It's ridiculous. So you're not going to keep your money there. It's just going to rot. And I know a lot of people do have money in their pocket because they don't know which way to go. They have this money in their pocket. They did well, and you have this park, but they don't know how to lend. And I totally agree. Going after, if you are going to start lending, obviously educate yourself. Make sure you get lawyers involved. Make sure you have the paper correct, because bad shit can happen, and you can lose that. Like anything else, there's a risk to it, but there's a big reward on that where you can. That's 100% pure passive income, because you don't have to worry about managing the manager, or that's where I think eventually people start off buying properties. They have cash flowing properties. They refi. They have all this money. They're sitting on this capital. Well, what do you do with it next? You can continue buying properties, I guess, but maybe you get to a point where you're like, I'm okay with the properties I have. I just want more passive income and just lend out. And they're bridge loans. Most of these are going to be bridge loans. You don't have to keep it there for 25 years. They could be like 5 years, 3 years, 6 years. You call the shots on that, which ultimately I think all of us, I took a baby step and I just lent to myself, but ultimately I think all of us want to be there at that point.
Well, it's true mailbox money because you have no management, it's a consistent return. And if they default and you have the right paperwork, you own it after a very short period of time. You have checks and balances to make sure that the property isn't raped and pillaged. So you have a property that's actually gone up in value since you've lent the money, because you have a third-party management team that actually takes care of the property, so it can't be destroyed, and you're in a much better position. And if you want to sell off the property, you can, or relend. Find another buyer to put 30% down, and now you get that cash and you still lend the money at the same interest rate that you had. So you've just gotten now a 30% down. Let's say it was you got $300,000 and you're still having your money at work. If it's $1 million, asset at $700,000,
you're becoming the bank, right? And that's where you want to end up all the time. The bank never loses. The bank
without the cost of being a bank, no employees, no building, and it's super passive. And if you know what you're doing, it's really a great way to grow your money. It really is. That's the best way. So, just to wrap this up, if you guys want to closing statements.
I think just that, lending out, again, I think we have to emphasize, you just don't go out lending money. You have to really educate yourself, understand what needs to be done, what are the steps, reverse engineer everything. Always what's the worst case scenario? They don't make a payment. They're starting to the property's decaying because they're not taking care of it, the management, and work your way back. What am I going to be doing, or what can I do in order to avoid this, one, and two, take back the property so that you can then run it or sell it or do whatever you want with it. The bottom line is if you're lending at the right loan to value, so if you're lending at 70%, then you have this 30% of equity that's in there at the time of lending. Even if things start going sour, when you take back the property, there's going to be equity there for you, and then you can choose whether to hold it or sell it.
Here. No, I would just clearly emphasize there's because I know people that have lent out money to friends, so-called, to purchase an asset, and sadly things could go sideways really quickly. And if you're not protected in the paperwork, because there's insurance clauses in there that you want to be sure that you're the beneficiary. You want to make sure that it's underwritten, that you have power to take over the leases and the rents, to assign the rents and things like that. So, and the broker, and to register your interest in that property in case things do go south. So I've seen a lot of people lend without the education, and you know what? You could be in a worse situation if you do that. So, but if you do it right, man, it's where I want to be. That's definitely what I want to be doing more of. In the next 2-3 years is lending out money. I think that's a true hands off passive income that you can enjoy.
Yeah. And it's
an asset, and the mortgage is an asset as well. We never said this is a first lien position on the property, and you basically have full control, just like a bank. It's worth noting. Sorry to interrupt you, Gabe, and again, if you don't know what the hell you're doing, you're going to lose. And it's not that if you've even been burned by borrowing or lending money before, it's not that lending doesn't work. It's the way you did it doesn't work. And sadly, ignorance is extremely expensive, and if by not doing it right and not understanding what to do, then it can be a real bitch. And you can figure this out by yourself, or if you want help figuring this out, we're always happy to help as well, because some have cash and don't want to necessarily figure out how to find these assets at 30% off. We definitely help those that are looking for great deals and great opportunities, and how to create opportunity over and over again using asset-based lenders. And some have worked hard their whole lives and have a lot of cash and just want to lend out the money so they don't have to work. And if you have that, we can help you with that as well. So both sides of the spectrum, and how to do it responsibly and really protect yourself and make sure you're not in a position where you're going to get hurt. And that's what we're all about. So whether you have money or access to money, we can help you with that side of the coin as well. So hopefully this was helpful and not more confusing than it needed to be. But I appreciate you, the listener, and of course, Gabe and Frank as well. And I'm looking forward to the next episode. And again, like it, love it, share it. Look forward to your feedback as well. Comment, leave a 5-star review if you absolutely love this. And I'm looking forward to your journey and your success, because that's all that really matters at the end of the day. Application of this information is extremely vital, because knowledge without application is a tragedy. You should really do this. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Have a good one.
If you like this episode of Big Fat Real Estate Checks, then show some love by leaving a comment and a good rating. Also, as a thank you for tuning in today, we've got a special free gift. The journey to passive cash flow for life starts by finding deals, and it's easier than you think. Simply go to getdealsbytuesday.com, enter your email address, and we'll send you a free quick start course called Deals by Tuesday. Even if it's 11 p.m. Monday night, this course will show you how to find discounted real estate deals by Tuesday. It's that fast and simple. Go to getdealsbytuesday.com and start your journey toward life-changing cash flow today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.